Hi, everyone. I'm Austin Palmer. I'm the designer of A Little Dinghy, and I'm here today with a instructional and playthrough video. A Little Dinghy is a 9 card game, and it's a in-hand game, meaning you don't need a table. It's played entirely in hand, and it is a combination sort of dexterity and tile laying game. You will be creating a map using these 9 cards, and then once you've created a map, you have to sort of trace a trade route through it. Um, so let's get started. So to set up the game, you're just going to shuffle these 9 cards. You can rotate them however you want. You would want to flip some of them because they're double-sided. The rotation doesn't really matter, but all you want to do is shuffle them. And then once you've shuffled them, take the top card, add it to your hand, and this will be the start of the map. And once you've done that, you're ready to play. So before I get started with how you actually play, let me go over how these cards work. Each card is a piece of the map, and it's split up into a 3x4 grid of spaces. There's 2 types of spaces. These sort of blank squares here are water spaces, and these islands here are land spaces. Each group of land spaces is called an island, and each island will have one harbor here. So, and then the most islands will also have their harbor pointing to a empty water space, and this will be the port for that island. It's important to know that this space won't always be the port for that island because you will be overlapping these map cards. And in fact, some islands won't have a port just on the card itself. You would only get a port for this island by adding it to the map where it's pointing to a water space. There are a lot of other icons on these cards, but we can ignore those for now because those are for various scenarios. These are used for specific scenarios. These symbols are used for other scenarios. But for just the base game, you can ignore all this. All you have to worry about is the land spaces, water spaces, harbors, and ports. So let me just shuffle up again. All right. So here's the start of our map. And the game takes 8 turns where you're going to create a map, and then at the end of the 8th turn, you have to trace a successful route through the map. And again, like I said, this is an in-hand game. So while you're building the map, you have to be able to hold the whole thing in your hands. You can pass it between your hands at any time. You can hold it with your right, your left, you can need to hold it with both. But if you ever drop a card, or if you ever sort of mess up the cards in a way that you can't fix them, you immediately lose. You can, however, adjust them if they ever get slightly out of alignment. So if, say, you have a map that's kind of like this, and it ever gets a little crooked, you can always adjust it. But if you ever say, let's say you just have these 3 cards, and then you sort of knock them and they get all messed up, if you can't fix them to how they normally were, then you lose the game. But each turn you will just take the top card of the deck here, and you can rotate it however you like, but you can't flip it, and you're going to add it to the current map. You can overlap or underlap any cards that are already here, but the only 3 restrictions are: 1, you can never partially cover an island, so this wouldn't be allowed because we're partially covering this. You have to extend the map by at least 1. So for instance, I couldn't just tuck it under like this, that wouldn't be allowed. And also, every card has to have at least 1 space visible by the end of the game. So if you, say, did this, you couldn't then do something like this because that would completely cover this card here. And then finally, you also can't ever have 2 islands adjacent to each other. They can be diagonal, something like this, but they couldn't ever be touching like this. So in this case, here's our starting map, and we'll add a card to it. Let's say something... Well, that's not going to work. That's not great either. Let's start with this. So this is currently a legal placement. We've extended the map, and we don't have any adjacent islands, and we don't have any partially covered islands. And the goal you're trying to create from this map is to be able to trace a route, starting at a port, visiting every single port you have on the map, and that doesn't visit any space twice. So right now, we actually wouldn't be able to do that with this map because if we started here, we could move here and visit this island, but we couldn't visit this port here, and so we would fail at our objective. So by the end of the game, we hopefully will be connecting all these islands together in a way that we can trace a successful route through them. All right, so that's our map right now. Here's the second turn. We need to add this card here. So, all right, that's good, because now we can, well, it's still not perfect, because we can sort of go up here, and then we could come down here to this and trace down to this port and then over here, but that still wouldn't be legal because we would be sort of doubling back. Our route would go this way up, then we'd have to visit this space a second time, and that's not allowed. So we're kind of on the right track. What would be great is to get an empty space, a water space right here, but right now we currently can't do anything. Also, you can vary the difficulty of the game, and the default difficulty is that your route has to visit at least 5 islands. So here, even if we were able to trace through all these islands successfully, we would only be visiting 4 ports. So we'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, and we need to have at least 5. For higher difficulty, you increase that. For lower difficulty, you would decrease that. Also, for people who have trouble holding the cards like this, or if you have smaller hands, you can always remove cards randomly from the deck so that you only have to add, 8 or 7 cards instead of 9 to the map overall. But anyway, so this is the end of the second turn. This is what our map looks like. For our third turn, we'll add this, and this works right here. So we'll add this to the map here. And as you might be able to tell, this is sort of where the dexterity element comes in, because you have to be able to place these while keeping the whole thing in your hand. You can never put it down on the table. You have to make sure you're always holding it. So you have to have sort of good kind of fulcrum here so that you can keep them all pieced together just with one hand, or maybe 2 if you're lucky. So here we're on the right track. We can visit all 4 islands with a single route, but we've only got 4 islands. So we have to add at least 1, and then we'll be able to kind of finish up our map in the game successfully. So here's our next turn, here's the next card, and we have to add this. Now, we could, if we wanted to, do something like this. Well, we couldn't do this because this would cover up this card entirely, and that's not allowed. But you're allowed to cover up an island if you no longer think it's useful, just as long as some part of the card is still showing. So for instance, this card here, we couldn't ever cover up this water space because that would completely cover up the card. So what do we want to do here? Let's see, maybe go... It'd be great if we could do something like this, but that partially covers up this island, and that's not allowed either. We could just tuck that there, maybe try to get a foundation for something else. So let's do that. So that hasn't really helped us in any way. We haven't made it easier for ourselves. We haven't added any islands to our route, but hopefully we can get something next turn. So let's adjust so we're holding it like this. And let's add this next card. Okay. So maybe we can do this. Yes, that works great. So it's getting a little difficult, but if I adjust my grip here. All right, so now we should be okay. So we've got everything adjusted correctly. And just a second, I have to align all this correctly. All right, so right now we're doing okay. We have all right, so now we officially have 5 islands, and we can connect to all of them. The game's not quite over, because obviously we have to add the other cards. And importantly, we need to make sure that if we add any more islands, we are able to reach them. So it's not just that we have to be able to visit 5 islands. We have to make sure we visit every island that has a port in our map. So right now we're accomplishing that. Sorry, let me just... All right, right now we're accomplishing that, but we've still got a couple turns to go, and this is kind of, as you can tell, being a bit of a nightmare because my map's a little bit too big for me to hold in one hand. Okay, so we're good now. So we've got 3 more cards, and if we add any more islands, we need to make sure we can reach them, and otherwise we just need to make sure that we're following the rules. So here we'll just place this here, kind of stabilize our map. All we're adding is water spaces, so we don't have to worry about that. We can do the same here. Still okay. Although, no, that would be... I would love to do it here, because that would be easy. Unfortunately, I wouldn't really be able to grab it on this side. So, this is a little more annoying, since I have to shift my grip just to fit it. But that works. Alright, everything's still mostly aligned. And then for our last card... You know what, let's get a little... Let's go the extra mile. And now we should have a route that can take us not just to 5, but to 6 islands. But now it's time to test it out. So we've built our map, and that ends sort of the first half of the game, where you actually create the map. If you ever drop a card, like if, say, if this fell out of the map to the table, or if it ever sort of got so skewed that I couldn't really fix it, I would have lost the game. But at this point, you've completed the map part, and now you have to get to the actual route part. So to trace your route, you don't have to physically trace it, at least in the one-player game, but you do have to be able to have a route that starts at a port, ends at a port, visits every single port showing on the map, and doesn't visit any single space twice. So let's see if we can do that here. We'll start, say, here. We'll go here, that visits this port. This way, this space, this space, this space visits this port. Go here, this visits that port. Still not doubling over. Then we'll move this way, here, visiting this port, here, and then here, visiting this port. So we've successfully completed the route, which means we've won the game, because we completed our map, we traced our route visited all of the ports on the map, and it visited at least 5 ports, which is the default standard difficulty. So we've won the game. If for some reason we weren't able to visit every port, or if we visited fewer than 5, then we would have lost the game, just as if we had, lost some cards from our hands. And that's the basic game of A Little Dinghy. Like I said, there are various symbols that deal with different scenarios. Those can be found at the end of the rules. I won't go over them in detail here, but they just sort of add little tweaks to the rules, different ways to win, different ways to lose, or different restrictions that you have to deal with of your routes. So that is A Little Dinghy. I hope you found this helpful, and have a great day.